Welcome, guys, to another edition of Dara and Barry and David go through Barry's hand histories. This one has a theme to it, as they often do. The theme of this one is exploitative poker. Why, you ask? Well, because Dara and Barry are about to release their book on exploitative poker beyond GTO. In fact, it might even be out by the time this video drops. Barry, welcome. Dara, welcome.
Thank you.
You.
Barry, I see here you have a lovely Unibet table up and running already. We've got Ace King, and there's already been some action. I imagine you're going to do something that is not GTO approved, but for a very good reason.
Yes, that's right. So these are all hands from the same tournament. I have. It was quite a while ago that I played it, but I have made some notes about what I felt the appropriate exploit was, what my read at the time was. In a couple of instances, I think it's where I made a mistake and I was the one that did something exploitable that could be used against me. But this first hand, the player on top left, Ramin 2, has been calling any two cards for fun for the entire time that I've been there. I don't think he was a bad player. I think he was literally just bored and gambling. So the first hand I play against him, my exploit really is just my bet sizing. Normally, I would be betting smaller pre-flop, and then you're about to see on a monotone board like this, I'd normally be betting very, very small. But I went half pot on this board. As you can see, he called it pretty much straight away, and then now you can kind of see the sort of thing we're dealing with. We play a few hands against him. Do you have any comments on that particular hand, or it seems to have played itself, right, guys?
Well, before we throw to Dara for what will probably be a better comment than mine, the first thing I'd say is I don't hate your raise to 4x pre. I think that's probably there or thereabouts what I would raise to with that hand. And I suppose if you take in the fact that you think you're up against an old-fashioned, weak, loose, passive opponent who's going to limp and then call a lot, I suppose you could actually size up even bigger, perhaps, against that guy if you really feel like there's no folds pre. Like when there's no folds pre and you have a premium hand, just like get loads in pre, maybe even 5.5, who knows, even 6x there. But yeah, 4x is obviously pretty reasonable too. I totally get your point about that board texture. I think it's the perfect board for you to bet like 20% on. But with this guy not going to surrender any sort of piece of it, if he's got any heart, which we know is in trouble, if he's got any pair, which he doesn't even have to have a good one, he's going to stick around. So I quite like your idea of sizing up as an exploit there. And then, you know, it seems like this might be the guy who you played it perfect against, because you end up in a situation on the river where he has to be good so infrequently that he's almost like created a pot that's so big and horrible that he feels obliged to call off the rest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I think I pretty much agree with everything David said there. I'm not even sure he's thinking about pot odds on the river, to be honest. I think he's just thinking, well, he might just have the ace of hearts with nothing else. So he clicks the call button. I mean, like from his perspective, he does flop a pair and a draw, albeit the worst of both worlds in that category, and he turns a gut shot as well. And then this type of player, in my experience, when they get to the river, if they have anything at all that beats any of the bluffs, they'll tend to call. It's sort of the call the turn, call the river mentality that we talk about in the book. Which, I mean, it shows how hard it would be to bluff this guy. You know,
yeah.
If we had ace queen no heart, we should probably play this very differently.
So we continue. Not entirely sure how this hand went down, but as you can see, he's limped again. I think this is the very next down hand, actually. I mean, I'm obviously going to isolate, so I bet it's a 4 last time, so I went to 5 this time. That seems the appropriate adjustment, probably. Obviously, a different dynamic now because there's another player in the hand that's overcalling, which is probably not a terrible strategy for Deltux because he's getting some sort of element of protection from ramming. And yeah, so I think the exploit here that I was going to mention is oh no, it's not a multi-way pot. No, I'd definitely be betting this size on this sort of board texture, especially against this kind of player. Let's see what happens. Oh, he folds. Okay, so we obviously had absolutely nothing there. I think I mainly just left that hand in for context for what's about to happen in the next hand. But any comments on that one?
I do have one comment, just purely the difference between the two hands we've seen already. In the first hand, you made it 4x, and I said that was actually pretty much a standard open size for me, even off that shallower stack, because you're out of position, and I think that's just like the right amount. In position, obviously, we can go smaller, so your decision to go large, admittedly, likely going multi-way, it didn't happen in the end, but in a lot of worlds you would have, seems pretty good to me. So that one seemed like a slightly more exploitative 3-bet size, but again, not wildly exploitative, to be honest, Barry. I think something around 4.5x is probably standard, so 5x not really too crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Dara, we good?
Yeah, I mean that hand's pretty standard in my view. Not really much to talk about.
So this is the interesting hand. So we've at an undergun shove. An isolation shove. Now Max must have been paying attention to ramming to some extent. What do I do here? So yeah, I'm not 100% shoving here by design. Although I don't just want to flat.
Oh wow!
And so we've had a ridiculous overcall, and then this is what happens.
We have to call it off for sure.
Yeah, I did.
Worst case scenario, 2 overs and a gut shot.
Yeah, and I mean, testament to me. Like if you look at the cursor at the bottom, you see how incredibly quickly I call. I don't even think about it. And obviously get very lucky to turn the nuts there. Yeah, I mean, I guess the only question really is: do you play pre-flop differently? Do you flat there ever or shove? Was I making some sort of error by putting in a not quite shove re-raising?
I think the general thing to do in that spot, given the action, and obviously it's both from early position, but the first guy is so short, it's almost like his one should be disregarded, is just to shove. That would be, I think, quote unquote, the standard line. But I think your very unusual, very weird kind of click there, knowing the kind of player Raman was actually a very good adjustment, because yeah, he's the kind of player who just wants to see a flop, catch a piece and go with us. And you allowed him to do that. Now, he did catch a piece to go into the lead, but not by very much. And certainly in a lot of worlds, he would have put those 30 big blinds in and then maybe put in the rest drawing virtually dead. And that would have been a good spot, or indeed folded away the little bit of equity he might have had in another scenario. So no, I actually really like that. What I would say, however, is it's not going to be very common for our audience out there to find this kind of play in any kind of strength of field. This is very much, I think this might be a $10 or $25 buy-in. I'd be surprised, in fact, if it was even a $25 buy-in. You won't see that much of this kind of stuff on Unibet at the 25 and up level. This would certainly be more the $1 to $10 maybe stuff, or in fact, just like one random guy who is playing a bit funny. But it's very important for those guys playing lower stakes online, and even for the guys playing higher stakes who recognize that type of whale, maybe in a live environment or online occasionally, to be able to like hone in on him, because your ability to get into pots with this guy now early on in this tournament has basically got you up to 166 big blinds, which is like 5 times anyone else at the table, I think, bar one of them. Yeah. And, sometimes we need to deviate from our normal ranges or our normal size in this case, to really target in on getting those chips before someone else does. I think that's one of the key points in exploitation, is that like you have to start, getting your hands dirty with some like subpar holdings, because actually you'll play post flop better. They're still probably better hands than he's playing, and you want to get those chips because you know somebody at the table is getting them.
Dara?
Yeah, I mean, there should be, against more sophisticated opponents, there should be absolutely no difference between the shove and the raise you made, because you pot committed yourself. You put in well over half your stack. But as we say in Beyond GTO, less sophisticated players are just not stack size aware. And one big thing that jumps out against them is they treat the all-in bet as different functions.
Absolutely, that was definitely top of mind.
Yeah, they tend to actually overfold often to all-in bets, but they underfold to every other size, including even sizes that are essentially functionally the same as all-in. I mean, I think you could also just flat it, and it'd be much the same effect. So I don't think there's much difference. I think the one thing you don't want to do is go all in with a player like that sitting behind.
Yeah.
And yeah, then once he flops a piece, he just sticks it in.
This next hand, I believe it's one where I felt I just, oh no, we got kings. No, this isn't the next hand that I was expecting. Oh yes, right. No, this isn't an exploit based on the players at the table. This is what I call a stack size exploit, which is basically I looked at the GTO ranges in this spot, and kings is always a raise in this spot, at sort of 50-ish. Big blinds effective, but I felt this should always be a flat because we had quite a few short stacks acting behind. But then it got me in a sort of a situation where I had a tricky post flop spot as a result, which is it's obviously a very, very wet board. So it's been a while since I played this hand, but I did have a good reason for playing this quite passively, but I can't remember what it was. So we'll just play out the hand. Yeah, so I guess two questions really, like thoughts on the pre-flop line, and then thoughts on the fact that I played this quite passively post flop, because I've got kind of I guess I've got an underrepresented hand where I could have re-raised on the flop, right?
Well, first up, I think Dara will actually testify that flat is actually a flat that Dara's probably seen me do quite a bit in. Maybe not the highest stakes stuff, but like maybe like mid stakes, like 1Ks, 500s. He's definitely seen that sort of quote unquote Helmuthian trappiness from me. And I do quite like it in a spot where, yes, exactly, it's a little bit sort of beautifully set up with the 15, 13, 21 big blind, even the 26 big blind stack behind you. They are sort of ideal. What's so important when you decide to deviate in that way is you have to be incredibly disciplined post flop. You can't get married to the hand. You have to be very careful. As played, I would have raised flop because I would have just thought, okay, well, plan A was to get a squeezer, and maybe Jaeger still tries to isolate and I get him as well. Or, maybe it folds round and then, I get the board with the undercards. But what's especially good about the 8-7-2 board, and why I would have raised, is we do have backdoor clubs to the king of clubs, which is useful. And there's quite a lot of pocket pairs in his range that are above eights and below kings that we can target to get the whole stack from. So I would have been very keen to do that in this spot.
Yeah, I think I was trying to not get married to my hand, like you suggested that you should be in these situations, which is why I was playing it a little bit more passively. Dara, what do you think about that?
Yeah, first of all, I think like we're talking about 50 big blinds effective, but if we look at all the stacks behind, there's 26, 13, 21, 14. If you actually put this in at I'd say 20 bigs effective, which this hand almost is because the player's yet to act mostly in that zone, then it will actually do a lot of flatting the song. Yeah. So I think that's fairly standard because you have weaker hands that want to flat, and you want to be able to protect your flatting range so that people behind can't just shove when they see an open and a flat. In terms of post flop, I agree pretty much with David. Like I'm not really worried about not having the best hand anymore. If the guy has aces, well, it's aces versus kings, and it's kind of a cooler. The only other hands we really have to worry about are sets, and he's probably not even opening pocket twos from that early position. And again, if he has a set, then so be it. We're kind of getting there's just far more combos of stuff we beat. As David said, all the pairs between kings and eights. We can stack by raising the flop, because he might put us on a draw or ace eight suited or something like that. So yeah, I think that's the better approach. That said, by just flattening, you're probably going to keep those hands betting anyway.
Yeah.
I don't know what he gave up with on the river. I'm going to guess he just had ace king. So we might have to make more from the ace king part of the range by playing the line you have. So both lines have some merit, but on balance, I probably would lean towards raising because he has so many pocket pairs we can stack.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Right. So my note is that I feel like I played this one badly. I bet because he misses a lot, but technically it's GTO at super low frequency. Let's see what. Okay, this makes sense. Okay, so I think my criticism of my own play is the fact that I bet a middle pair here. Let's see what he does. I remember this hand now. Just briefly get a party poker table out of the way.
Yeah, boo, party poker. Okay. A tricky little one.
Right, so I'll just talk through. So I bet the middle pair there just because I kind of felt like it's probably more profitable just to take this hand down, deny some equity. When he called and the 10 came, I kind of felt I was in a situation where he's either got a 10 or he's got a draw that's going to bluff at me. So betting didn't seem to didn't seem like a particularly good idea. So I check called. And then when the 5 came, I felt I was in a sort of way ahead, way behind situation where if I bet, he's going to only give me action with the 10. So I turned it into I was hoping to check call. What do we think? That sounds like I made a reasonably well-constructed decision there, or have I completely butchered it on?
Well, Dara, if you want to go first this time, I don't mind.
Yeah, I mean, generally out of position, we don't want to do too much betting. We don't really have range advantage because we've just opened from a late seat. So we have a fairly wide range. He's not going to call absolute garbage on the button. So if anything, he has a slight range advantage. So I think we should be doing a lot of checking here. There are certain boards where we do a decent amount of leading, but I don't think the 10 high board is one. The 10 doesn't really favor us. I think a 9 high board would be different because a lot of our worst opens will be, king 9, queen 9, jack 9. So actually on a 9 high board, we probably have a lot more 9x than he has, but I think he probably has a decent amount of 10x. He's going to flat stuff like ace 10, king 10, maybe. So I think just we shouldn't really be focusing on our hand, the fact that we have middle pair. We should just, and I know even as middle pair, like we can just check call it if it's the best hand right now. Bluff catching is going to be very profitable. So yeah, I think probably checking the flop is the way to go on this.
Okay.
Yeah, I quite like the idea of checking the flop as well. But as played, and you do choose to bet, I think the sizing's kind of okay. Normally you'd go a little bigger on this texture, maybe, but by going smaller when you are playing quite shallow, I think that's probably okay in this spot. That's my hunch anyway. And then when you get the 10 on the turn, you definitely can't, check fold now because obviously he has a lot of floats in his range. He could have the jack king of diamonds, jack queen of diamonds. He could have, just a random overcards kind of combo with maybe a heart in it. Or indeed he could have all these pocket pairs, which, yes, they're ahead of you, but, that's just one clump of the range, if you like. I think you will get floated a fair amount on this board. So you do have to go into check call mode, which you do. And then on the river, obviously, you get a really good card because it has overtaken that clump of hands I said that you were behind. And I don't know, is it maybe better to... This is an interesting one that I haven't fully thought about yet, but is it more interesting to bet yourself and target those hands, or is it better to check and hope that he does continue bluffing with the Jack Queens and Jack Kings and other stuff that he might have decided to float and then stab on the turn. I'm actually not entirely sure what's better.
It's definitely a leak of mine to only put people on hands that have a really obvious relationship with the board. I often forget about floats like, say, King Jack suited, King Jack of diamonds, which obviously makes perfect sense. So I played this very much like, well, he's either got a 10 or a flush draw. But yeah, I mean, obviously, looking at the hand he has, this would have been a perfect hand to put out, to bet fold basically, and let him call with it. So,
yeah, to be honest, I often find that if they do have the flush draw on a flop like that, they might actually just raise to happily get it in, because it's kind of hard to think of what combo of flush draw doesn't have at least one overcard or a straight draw going for it as well. So it's sort of one of those spots where, yeah, I wouldn't necessarily think, okay, it must be hearts. I'd be more thinking it was maybe the backdoor flush draw, or but yeah, I don't know, Dara, coming to you on that one, because I'm genuinely not sure whether Barry's better to target, these kinds of hands by betting, which is a strange line to bet and then check call and then bet again yourself. Or is he better off using this as a good bluff catcher?
I think at lower stakes, I prefer betting myself, because I mean, this goes against what a lot of people think about lower stakes, but I think you actually see less bluffing at lower stakes than you do at higher stakes. I mean, it really comes down to when you have a hand like this, the question is, like, if you bet, you more or less take away his ability to bluff, if you bet yourself. But if you check, he gets to check behind hands like sevens. So it's a question of which of those two is a bigger part of the range, in your opinion. Marginal hands that he will just check behind, but he would have called the bet with himself, or absolute nothings that he'll bluff. And I think at lower stakes, there's more in the latter category. I think he started this hand around 25 big blinds, right? That already tells us, we already know, having seen the hand now, that means he's more passive, because 25 bigs, he should just shove this hand pre-flop. So that means he actually has more pairs in his range than he should have, and possibly less draws. So yeah, I think I would go ahead and bet this myself and just try and get called by all the pairs. And particularly when you use a non-all-in size against players, as we said earlier, they'll just call too much, and they can see all the hearts that have missed as well. And so yeah, I think very few lower stakes players will fold any pair to a say 2/3 pot bet here, or even a pot bet.
So I'm glad you mentioned players bluff less at these stakes, because that's the theme of the next couple of hands. Not this hand. There we go. So this player two trick has been very, very quiet. And when he does play a hand, he was very, very passive. So I already didn't particularly feel happy with my jacks when he raised like this. We're in the money, by the way. So the bubble's just burst. So ICM is somewhat low at this stage. So yeah. So he, as I said, I don't think he's bluffing much at all. I think he's got the top end of his range. I'm not a huge fan of jacks right now, so can't remember how the hand played out, but I presume I played it very passively or even folded to one bet. There we go. So I feel like if I just fold there every single time, I'm very, very exploitable. But
yeah, I mean, and even if he has a strong range, he can still have stuff like Ace King. So
yeah, exactly. That's Ace King is doing a lot of heavy lifting with my ranging of it at the moment to continue.
Yeah, also tens is a very reasonable holding too. So,
well, although a player like this might not even 3-bet tens.
I agree with Dara on that one. I would not expect to see tens. So yeah, and then he had exactly Ace King. So yeah, so is there anything I can do on the turn there? I guess is my only real question.
I don't think so. Ace King's the only hand we're beating in the perceived range, and there's only one card to come, so Ace King doesn't have a ton of equity, so we can't really bet, because we don't know yet whether he has Ace King or Queens, Kings, or Aces, which we're pretty much dead against. So yeah, we're obviously unlucky that he hits his King on the river, but so be it.
Yeah, completely concur. I think you played the hand very well, to be honest. And I do think even against what you might term more face-up opponents who have tighter ranges, you just can't give up to one bet there on the flop. So I like how you played it.
I don't think I had a read at this point against this player. I do have a read on him later on for another hand. My only question in my notes is what can I do on this run out? So let's just see what happens. So he's opened. I raised quite small, to be perfectly honest, with kings from the big blind. I presume I'm always betting this board, betting it quite big because it's quite a dynamic board. There we go, the ace on. So he quickly calls, and now
we shove every other. We probably shove almost every other turn card, but
yes, exactly. So I mean, I'm almost certain I'm about to check.
Well, he'll probably just check back with, nines and a jack X. So, and hope his showdown is good. So maybe it's pretty reasonable to check fold in that spot. Obviously, board is incredibly wet. What I would say here is I don't hate the idea of just shoving flop. It's 2x pot. It's a little clunky, but it is exactly the kind of board that is wet enough that we're not going to like a load of turn cards, like maybe half the deck we don't really love. And, we have a strong hand right now. It can absolutely be called by an inferior one because that's what we might also do sometimes with our flush draws and overs. It might even be what we do with our flush draws with an under, like if we had the ace five of clubs. It might be what we do with our king queen, our ace king, and our ace queen. They might all. Dara, you can maybe speak to this better, but what I learned from solvers in the last few years is around about 2x seems to be the threshold for when you get these kind of jack 10 boards. When you've got the ace king and the ace queen sometimes, and then also balancing it out with when you do have it with the overpairs, because they are quite dangerous boards.
Yeah, I agree. I think shoving the flop is the play here. I think, as David said, at that stack to pot ratio, because like the smaller bet you made allows him to call with a lot of hands that have almost the right price. And then he gets to decide on the turn whether he wants to put the rest in or not. So you kind of allow him to play perfectly. Whereas when you shove, you get him to fold some very high equity hands, which is a great thing. And if he calls off with ace jack or whatever, so be it. You've got it in the head. So yeah, I think shoving the flop is the play here. As tunk as it seems, I know we've gotten kind of into the habit of thinking there's no big betting in 3-bet pots, but there is at shorter stack depths when the SPR is 2 or less, as David said. Also, I think just on the river, there is another possibility. I think what I call the Ape Stars 10% bet.
Yeah, I was going to say the little tiddly blocker could be interesting.
Yeah, because he could have an ace and he's worried about a 9 or something like that, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like if he has, even if he has an ace, I think if we throw out a 3% bet, he's probably not going to raise. He'll probably just call it, and if he has something like Queen Jack or King 10 or whatever, he's not going to fold to that small size either. So that bet can achieve two functions. It can stop him from bluffing, and it can actually get called by worse.
It's you can both pat yourselves on the back as well, because the next note that I have written down is that solver likes shove flop. So you were bang on. So well done. Take the rest of the day off. After this, okay. So yeah, I don't know why this has made the cut. What's going on here? Okay. I
think we can be pretty sure he would have stuck us in with the vast majority of his aces pre, so I would have fired a C bet there. Obviously the king's a nasty one to see on the turn, so as played, I don't mind checking back once the king comes.
Yeah,
but I do fire a C bet regardless of that ace on the flop.
Yeah, same. I just see bet range there, so we can use very small size as well. We can even bet just one big blind.
So we're back in the hand against the player that I had the kings against. Now the tournament has gone on a little bit now, and I have developed a read that he's very, very aggressive. So that informs this this hand as I get an iPoker table out of the shot eventually. There we go.
This is the same guy we played the Kings against, right?
Yeah, at the time I was readless against him, but since then I developed the read that he was quite an aggressive player.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, tough one here. We exactly the kind of spot where we might be good right now, and we obviously have a draw. Oh, well, that's good news. Oh, can we go back there? Did he fold?
No, it's cut out the recording. He did fold, but it just got missed off the recording. So let's just.
I don't hate the idea of checking it over to him one more time. I'm not sure you're meant to call turn with any 6x anymore. So actually, I think maybe he value bets thinner than he would call, and you making backdoor diamonds is a very small part of your range there. So while yes, indeed, he might have just had nothing, and it doesn't matter either way. Presuming he wouldn't have bet his nothing, I think I would have just checked it over to him again.
I missed the turn, actually. What happened on the turn?
It was a check call, both turn and turn.
What size, roughly?
Let's have a look. Let's just play again. It's really quick.
So flop action is half pot, call, turn. I think is half pot again, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Okay, slightly under, maybe 40%.
Mm-hmm.
And then our stack to pot ratio is about 0.65.
Yep.
I think I would have checked it over to him instinctively, but obviously that allows him to maybe like check back some weak aces and stuff that maybe would have paid.
Yeah, this is what I was thinking. I was thinking he was basically going to check back the lower aces and some like king tens, 9-10s, stuff like that.
Yeah, this is a spot where I wish we'd used the 10% pot bet the last time, because I think we could use it again here.
Yeah.
And it might induce some bluffs if he thinks we're just trying to protect a weak ace. And at the same time, he's never going to fold to it. He has anything at all. So yeah, I think again I would like a 10% pot bet here.
Yeah, no, I like that.
But in the spirit of this video, I suppose I'm thinking exploitatively, and your read on Aguilante was that he was a loose aggressive player. I suppose if we take ourselves out of a solver approved sort of world, and we go to like what can we now target in on about his tendencies? One, is he a triple barreler? And if he is maybe sliding it over to him one more time the best thing to do? Or is he the kind of guy who's really aggro, but when you call flop and turn, because Dara would talk about these kinds of players a lot, and I'm sure you do too, Barry, is the guys who are really happy to go flop turn, but rarely actually fire that third shell. It is a psychological difference in different kinds of opponents, whether they're willing to do the three barrels.
Yeah, we've seen this guy shove the river before, so I think, and I think even in Solverland, I think we probably check here. I think actually betting is an exploit.
So you're actually trying to tease him and induce him with that.
Yeah, like, you're trying to tease him with
5 big blinds bet or something.
Yeah. The solver actually played it exactly as I played it. I'm afraid to break the news to you, but obviously we're not playing against the solver, so that's
I think he has a lot of available bluffs as well, and that's another thing. Like all of his broadways without an ace are missed gut shots. So
I think there was a player population thing in the back of my mind as well here, which is I don't see people triple barrel bluff.
Yeah.
Often at these stakes on Unibet, which I think, and there's been a lot of times that have coloured my decision where I have checked a third time and the person has checked behind with some modest amount of showdown value, and I've hated myself for it. So it's a kind of a mix of, I think that there was a player population read in there, and there was also perhaps a mental game issue of my own where I probably deviated from what should have worked in that regard. But
I think that's a really interesting point, because obviously on Unibet, which is different from other poker sites that are out there, the players are essentially anonymous. Now, Barry Métis, a famous screen name, obviously, because you don't change it, Barry. and you are well known. Dara and I obviously play with our avatars on. So we're known, and there's plenty of other players who actually just never bother changing it. I suppose they just like the idea of the same screen name going battling, allowing people who are familiar with it to battle with them, and that's all in good fun as well that they do that. But you're right to lean into population tendencies in general on Unibet, because you could literally be up against the best player on Unibet right now and the worst. You have no idea based on a screen name that you haven't seen before. So I think that's kind of an interesting one in it. And I do agree with your general read, both at these stakes and on Unibet, that you won't find the triple barrel bluffers as often. I think that is a correct population tendency to bear in mind. So yeah, I think there's some interesting stuff in that already.
I actually did want to change my screen name on Unibet, but there wasn't enough characters for ACR Bot Contest 2024, which was
yeah. The only thing I would say about the river sizing is, like, again, not to keep harping on this, but people overfold to the all-in size, even though
no, I like the very small blocker bet. That seems like,
so, or even if we're not going a small blocker bet, like if you just go half pot and leave something behind, people see a very large functional difference between all-in and non-all-in, even if there shouldn't be in theory.
Plus, if he is as aggro as I'm starting to think he is, he might actually shove over a blocker bet if he's not.
Yeah, that's one of the big things about the block. Like sometimes when it's a true blocker bet, when you have a weak hand, people say, "Oh, well, I didn't want to throw out the small bet because then he might shove over it, and then what do I do?" But that points to the fact that when you have a very strong hand, that part of the range is printing with the small blocker bet.
Okay, so pretty standard sizing from you here, Barry. So nothing exploitative yet here with a strong hand. You go half pot on the Jack 5 deuce. Obviously, you have both wheel and Broadway backdoors.
Yeah, the exploit here is I exploited myself. I think I really missed an opportunity to fire that second bet, and then he went for it.
You think as played shoving turn would be nice?
I think as played shoving turn is perhaps a natural thing to do with my hand.
Yeah, I agree. I do agree, actually. I think you don't have to go as big as you did on the flop. Half pot seems very large in this spot, but then even in a 3-bet pot button against big blind, it's fairly wide ranges. But yeah, as played, I do like shoving the turn, because I think we can maybe get the sixes and sevens and stuff to fold.
There is ICM implications at this point, where
okay.
There's 12 players left, so we are very much heading towards the final table bubble. So and you don't want to stack off, particularly with Ace King in these spots too much. But that's calling it off, really. So
if we can rewind to the flop before a bet has been played, Barry, I'm interested to ask you, Dara. Like, are you thinking about sizing this one up for 3 streets, with your maybe something like a 25% flop bet, and then maybe sizing up to at least have that threat bet that you can get them all in by the river should you make your hand, or maybe even decide you are tripling off here?
I'm not sure. I'm trying to think of 2 modes here. Exploit and theory. Like, I think in theory we should probably actually go quite big here. Like, I'm not saying big, but like third to half pot rather than the smaller size, because of the stack depth. On the turn, I don't actually mind the check too much, because I'm just trying to think. I mean, I guess we're getting under pairs to the Jack. That's what we're targeting, and there are quite a lot of those, perhaps. I have to admit, I always find these spots really tricky, because we have some equity with our ace king. I mean, at the very least, we have a gutter to the nuts, and our ace and our king are going to be good a lot of the time. So yeah, I mean, I don't mind actually checking the turn. The other thing about checking, again, I think it depends on the type of player we're up against. Like, if we're up against a guy who floats super wide and he's going to bluff when we check, we can actually bluff catch this hand. But then ICM is another factor. So yeah, I think with ICM, now that I think about it, we probably should have sized smaller on the flop, and now we've kind of got ourselves into a gross spot on the turn with
Yeah.
a 1-to-1 stack to pot ratio. Yeah, I'd love to run this for ICM. We are
Yeah,
we are
I think
covered
I
as well.
think
Like
I
in the
think
ICM book, we talk about how big bets become small bets and how small bets become checks with in ICM extreme situations. So I think in theory this might be a big bet for chips. A bit by big I mean half pot, but I think in practice we should just bet small. And he also has ICM pressure, so he'll probably fall roughly the same range to a smaller bet. So yeah, I think we should have gone smaller on the flop. I think that's the key to the hand.
yeah, my instinct here is that with like obviously there's no flush draw for us, but with the double backdoor in terms of wheel and Broadway, I think if we go small with the plan to barrel when we pick up that draw, because we'll always have the two overcards anyway, which is
It's not a
nice.
double. It's not a double backdoor in the traditional sense, though, right? Because we can't make a double backdoor. Is like
No, but
yeah,
the overs essentially give us additional equity.
that's
Yeah,
right. Yeah.
Like yeah, you generally don't use a bare backdoor because it's not enough equity, but the overs here give us a significant amount of equity. So
Yeah.
yeah, um I think like I don't like shoving the turn in the current situation now because I think his range is stronger anyway than it should be because of
Mhm.
ICM. And I think we have extreme ICM on us as being 4 of 12. Um and but he also somehow so I think he'll do a decent amount of checking back if we check, at least if he's anyway ICM savvy. So we will
Mm.
realize equity. But by betting bigger on the flop, we've kind of strengthened his range as well.
Yeah.
I think he's going to give up all his nothings. So very least he has a pair. And I think he'll have the jack a decent amount of the time as well.
yeah. The way I'm looking at this one is on flop. I'm thinking to myself, bet something around 25%. If I pick up the queen 10, and then maybe also like the 3 or 4 of spades or clubs, I think I might bet them as well on
Mm.
turn.
Yeah.
Just because I think we can absolutely represent clubs and spades if they come in, if 3 clubs and three spades end up by the river. I think we can use our blockers as maybe one of our triple barrel candidates, bluff candidates, if we haven't got there. But also we do pick up equity on those cards. So we would then have an actual draw on the turn plus our overs. And I think that's probably an okay way to go about things.
Mm.
Yeah, that seems reasonable. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, also, we're talking about not being a double backdoor hand, but it kind of is in a sense that the wheel cards also give us a straight draw. The wheel cards and Broadway cards, Queen and 10, 4 and
Yeah.
3.
My point there was with the strength of a double backdoor is when you pick up a straightening card that's also a flush card, so it's got
Yeah, you can't have both for sure.
you can't have both with this particular type.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, for
yeah,
sure.
perfect. So the next two hands, I'll run through them both quickly because it's the same situation, and that is so is he going to raise? Oh no, it's a different. Here we go. Here we go. Yeah, that this is pure read. This player with a Christmas tree has been just basically limping every single hand and playing every hand passively. This is the first time he's opened the entire time. So I just straight up mucked the ace jack. We've got he covers us, the big blind covers us, and then we're about to get in the. If I just quickly forward to the next hand, so it's
I really like it for what it's worth. I think that's a perfectly fine exploit.
cool.
I don't think it's even an exploit.
It's probably just fine anyway,
I
isn't
think
it?
I think it's just a fold because of ICM. I don't think you're supposed to
Sure.
call like ace jack against early position raisers in the middle of nowhere with ICM.
No.
And then we have a
Like you basically supposed to do almost no flatting because of ICM, and it's not strong enough to 3-bet, so it's just a fold.
yeah, and then I insta folded here. Like I felt like this might have been an okay spot for a squeeze in if these two stacks were shorter and this player wasn't so sticky.
Yeah, no,
But
this is perfectly standard as well in my book. Like I think your range is supposed to be super tight. Like I think even nines might be a fold here. So yeah.
Yeah, I gotta agree with that.
Yep. And then I believe this is the last hand. Oh, there we go. And then the all edge. Turns out I would have
Up to set. So
would have won
You would have won it all, Barry. You would have won the tournament.
if I'd have.
But you did the right thing.
And then I believe this is the last hand that I picked out.
Okay, so it looks like you're equal second shortest of
Yeah,
6.
yeah. So but first of all, is it we defend, right? A king 6 suited plays well enough post flop to defend freeway with ICM implications as a short stack.
yeah, agreed.
I think that's fine.
So obviously this is a pretty good flop for us. Be better if there was some clubs out there, but so
Yeah, and it's very likely you'll get the free one on this texture, which is nice. The question is whether it's reasonable, Dara, for Barry to lead out on that turn, or
yeah,
sorry, on the flop, or indeed on the turn, but on the flop already. Is that maybe sometimes a lead?
Yeah, yeah. There are definitely some leads on boards like this. I think I'd probably lead my worst sixes maybe. Although I guess most of my worst sixes actually have a pair, so or they're straight already.
Mm.
So yeah,
I'd say the flush draw is a more obvious lead in a multi-way pot, right?
well, I think. Let me think. Yeah, I mean there are a lot of leads on these boards, and they tend to be sort of like fairly strong made hands that don't want checks around, like because you have a lot of 2 pairs on this board as well. Like you might expect some stuff like 5-4 suited. You probably even have sets because you probably don't shove those cards on the board. So you have a reasonable value. It depends on how wide your value range, but you are going to dip into your strong draws. Like multi-way, you tend to use stronger draws than heads up for your lead. So yeah, I think either flush draws or 6x are fine. So yeah, I guess a lot of your flush draws will have less showdown than this hand. They'll be 8 high, 9 high, 10 high, etc.
So I bet the turn. It seemed like a decent thing to do. I don't think the jack's particularly changing much, and my draw is reduced in value a little bit with one card to come. Got one fold, got a call, and then I go for a bluff here just because I kind of feel like I've got 6-5, and hands like 7-5 and so on and so forth. And I don't think I've got the showdown value. After
you got one of the worst hands you could possibly have here, and you're also not blocking the diamonds, which is nice. Because he might be just playing a flush draw passively.
Yeah. So I'm pretty certain I go for a bluff here.
Yeah, I don't think we need to bluff very big because we're only trying to get nothings to fold, basically.
Yeah.
So
I don't think we can get any made hand to fold, really.
No. There's no point in.
So I think you are like you can literally go, oh, okay. Well, he actually had a very strong hand on the flop. I think this is a spot where you can almost go like 3 big blind. Like you can bet like a quarter or a third. You just want to discourage like an ace high, obviously, because like the ace high of diamonds is a concern.
Yeah, I think 3 or 4 big blinds would have served the same function.
Or the ace 6, you'd love to get to fold as well.
You're just trying to get to fold.
It's good that was the final hand.
Maybe.
It's good that there's been a recurring theme, a definite teachable moment takeaway from all this, which is the merits of betting smaller on the river. Really, target a very small portion of a range. You can get away from it easily if someone has got something monstrous. If they fire back at you, it's probably the big lesson.
Yeah, and you eke out extra value in a lot of spots as well.
Yeah. So so that was the final hand. So bet smaller on the river.
And how did you in the tournament?
Sorry. Oh no, I think I went out within the next sort of 3 or 4 hands. So I think I came 6th.
Fair enough.
But all thanks to the chap at the very start of the tournament that kindly gave me 166 big blinds. I was able to coast all the way.
One thing about that is it does kind of show the value of in very soft fields being in from the start. We haven't talked about the merits of late edging, but in very soft fields, which is true of this stake level and also live tournaments, there is a huge amount of equity to be gained from playing against weaker players before they give it all away to somebody else.
Yeah, no joke. I actually genuinely think I coasted to the final table because of that. Very rarely was I forced sort of all in or anything after that, because would have been even nicer in if it was a PKO, because would have covered people. But hey ho.
Yeah.
So yeah. So anyway, good. I'm glad I played optimally in all those situations, guys. And
Yeah, or indeed when you diverged, obviously it was with the player pool tendency in mind. This is a $10 game on Unibet. It's not going to be an elite field. There's going to be some good players in the mix, I'm sure. But for the most part, it's going to be recreational guys who are flicking in an evening tournament. That's going to be probably tantamount to a £100 casino game in your local casino, and the kind of player tendencies are probably something similar. So yeah, always worth making those adjustments, whether it's a bigger bet size pre-flop, or it's an exploitative second barrel, or it's a bluff on the river, whether we deploy that lovely 10% bet, Ape Styles approved, that Dara likes so much, or if indeed we're just, really honing in on this last hand as what are the hands we're trying to fold. And it's basically ace highs and maybe the pocket threes. And we're thinking to ourselves, well, we can bluff cheaply. We don't have to bluff our stack. We don't have to bluff even half our stack. We could actually just fire out something that's just targeting a very small portion of the range. And when that works, it's a great result. On that note, Barry Carter, thank you so much. Dara O'Kearney, thank you so much. It is great to do these videos. I know we only do them maybe once a season or so, but getting to do a deep dive and an old-fashioned hand history review, either putting it through the lens of GTO as we have in other videos, or putting it now through the lens of exploitative poker, as you guys look to go beyond GTO. Do you see what I did there?
very good.
I worked in the name of the book into the...
Very good, David. Very good.
Thank you. Yeah. No, I don't even have notes for this. I winged it and I still got you there. No, on a serious note, congratulations on the new book. I know it's going to be an absolute triumph. I imagine it's going to be one of your biggest sellers ever. I think a lot of players in the trenches, a lot of players at all stake levels, really interested to know what are the exploits. And I know, Dara, you kind of, maybe to wrap us up, talk about how you went back to sort of first principles of hunches that people have about what exploits exist in live players, and then you basically did the deep dive into the solver, node locking, to ascertain whether indeed those hunches are true.
Yeah, it's one of those things where there's always been a lot of talk about exploitative poker, and we do, but less. It's often taken as gospel that the exploits that people identify are the correct exploits, and sometimes they are. Sometimes the spots are very simple. Like you get to the river and if the guy's over bluffing, then you call all your bluff catchers. It's not rocket science to work that out, but some of them are way less obvious, and often actually the exploits come in other parts of the game tree. If somebody is playing too aggressively in some spot, often there's not much you can do to exploit them, but then when they play passively, you can really exploit them, knowing that if they had any sort of a hand, they would be aggressive. What we found when we worked off a list of what I saw as very common leaks, is that in a lot of cases, the sort of obvious exploits, the exploits that people would have identified themselves, were the actual exploits. The solver came back and said, yeah, that's what you do. But in other spots, they were a lot less obvious. And I think they're the more interesting ones. Some spots where, players had some idea that this leak exists and this is how you exploit it, but actually there's an even better exploit that the solver can identify.
Excellent stuff. Well, the book is available on Amazon, which is also where you can pick up all of Dara and Barry's books. They're all well worth putting in the Christmas stocking if it's that time of year, or just buying one for a loved one whose birthday it might be, or just buying it for yourself because you want to get better at poker. Dara O'Kearney, Barry Carter, thank you so much.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, David.